First of all, apologies for turning up in video form rather than in person. It turns out my jury duty has gone longer than I hoped. I've come to talk about the Meristem project, which is a project to try and help improve secondary STEM education. It began a long time ago when I was trying to talk to physics teachers around the ACT about how we could help them. Turns out there are actually 2 to 3 times more academics in physics at ANU just itself in the research school than there are teachers in this town. And so we have this enormous vested interest in them doing well and enormous amounts of will to help them. And so I turned up to moderation day and I said things like, we will help you any way you like. And as you might imagine, they were, oh, that's very nice, thank you. Perhaps I wasn't expecting it, but the kind of response I got was very minimal. I've since likened it to the fact that what happens if you turn up to someone who's juggling 5 balls, they've got them in the air, and you say, can I help? Even if they really want help, it's hard for them to organize how to actually get it off you. And that was kind of my first inclination that helping secondary education was a task that's going to require me to learn how that world worked. It's very, very important that we do that. Australian standards in science, mathematics, and reading have been going down consistently over the last 15 years. And that's not just on a relative scale to other countries, that's actually on an absolute scale. So something about the secondary education system that we have is continuing to fail us. Some of this problem might be explained by the fact that a surprisingly large fraction, something between 15 to 30% of our teachers in Australia are teaching outside of their area. So in other words, they're teaching students about a topic that they have never studied at the university level. No matter how talented or dedicated that teacher, there's only so much they can do towards inspiring students to go on in that field. And so that produces a bit of a vicious cycle. People don't go on that field, so there's less teachers available in the pool, and so on. And so we're really in that kind of situation now. So completely independently of all that, in my own tertiary teaching, I was busy flipping my classes. And that means instead of spending my time in front of students telling them things, I spent all my time in front of students actually listening to them and making them do complicated things and supporting them through that. More interesting exercises, that kind of thing. This general approach is very well studied. It's been shown to do better. And in fact, when I tried it, it did indeed do better. Most of my students did about an entire grade better in the exam. And that happened that year, and it's happened every subsequent year. Other people in physics have tried the same thing, or at least different implementations of the same ideas, and they've found the same results. And so they've also seen about a grade bump in their exams. And so we're going, yes, we're doing this now, and so we're changing our whole program to be in this method. And because of that, we're doing it at first year. And then the next year I was talking to the teachers at moderation day. I said, hey, the first year material that we're doing is about the same as your year 11 and 12 stuff. And so I guess if you were interested, then we could package it and you could try flipping your classes. And suddenly they were incredibly interested. Suddenly we're saying, yes, we want this. Can we please have it? And thus the Meristem project was born. So over the last 2 years, we've made year 11 and 12 physics materials. It's gone over 3 semesters of beta testing. It's in 16 schools. There are 2 in Western Australia, 2 in New South Wales, 1 in Papua New Guinea, and the rest in the ACT. We've learned a lot. Even the beta feedback has been extremely positive. We've had full-time support for a person from the Research School of Physics Engineering. We've had support from the NCI, the supercomputer group. We've had ACT government support and a small amount of support from foundations. The materials are made by volunteers, academics, secondary teachers, undergraduate and postgraduate students. We've also had 7 PhD students do projects in this area, trying to figure out best practices in various areas, including areas we'd like to go into, like chemistry and mathematics and biology. We've also spent time working on the IT back end of things, and also a lot of time going into schools, talking to secondary teachers, seeing how these things are being used. It turns out that when this is working properly, it really does make it easier for the teachers, and they feel that it's helping their students, that their students are actually doing better. And certainly the evidence suggests that it does. Another key fact, besides the ability for us to add our expertise into areas, not just with keen teachers who are trained in the area, but teachers who are maybe keen teachers, but teaching out of area, or in rural communities where they have less resources and they don't have the same connection to universities that local schools do. And we really want to give that to the teachers. But we don't want to just give it in physics. We started there because that's who we are. We really want to give it in all the other STEM subjects as well. We want to move into chemistry and mathematics and biology. And indeed, it's potentially possible that we could go into all the Australian curriculum areas. Having world-class research experts help craft the message of direct instruction in secondary education for their discipline has obvious advantages in terms of the quality of that education. But there are also many responsibilities to being the face of secondary education within Australia. And with those responsibilities, of course, come a lot of opportunities. One of them is, of course, we get the ANU brand out there. We get seen to be interacting with these things. But more importantly, perhaps, imagine a world where the little voice in the head of any secondary science student that's telling them all about the universe, that's inspiring them, is female. What would that do to their conception of what it is to be a scientist, of who could be a scientist? We could have a very significant immediate effect on cultural norms just by having this kind of platform widespread and by choosing our presentation carefully. And so we have a large responsibility there. What we'd really like to do is expand out of physics, getting into, we want to do chemistry and mathematics next. We're very interested in doing biology and indeed expanding across all the sciences. To do that, we're going to need help. It's a volunteer effort, and so in some sense, a lot of the effort comes free, but we need to coordinate all those volunteers. We have a lot of teacher management to do, a lot of school management to do. We have a lot of work to do, and we're finding that one full-time person is not quite enough on this project. And so what we'd like to do is access the College Strategic Fund, which is there for things that are across multiple schools and yet don't fit in naturally into the normal sort of funding patterns. And this is a classic example of something like that. It's a really powerful, important outreach thing. It could genuinely change the face of science in Australia, and yet whose job is it? How should we fund it? The College Strategic Fund could really help us. What we're looking for is one full-time person to come onto the team to help coordinate and get these extra disciplines up and running and pushed out as fast as possible. Any kind of support from the college executive on that front would be great, and indeed individual support from individual schools would certainly add up and would be really great as well. Thank you very much for listening.